At our anniversary party, my best friend's toddler handed my husband a hidden, handmade, best dad card. The room went dead silent. The glass shattered. What I did next made them regret every lie. The champagne glass felt cold and heavy in my hand, but not as heavy as the secret I was carrying in my heart. I was 34 years old, standing in the middle of a stunning, magazine-worthy living room, wearing a fitted emerald green silk dress that my husband Harrison swore made me look like a movie star. It was our 7th wedding anniversary. Soft jazz was playing from the expensive sound system Harrison had installed himself. The caterers were circulating with trays of miniature crab cakes and truffle risotto bites. Laughter echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings of the home we had built together. From the outside, looking in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, anyone would think I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had the perfect house, the perfect career, and a handsome, successful architect husband who was currently holding court by the fireplace, charming our friends with his easy, magnetic smile. But perfection is just a facade, isn't it? It is just a thin coat of fresh paint over rotting wood. As I watched Harrison laugh with his business partners, a familiar, hollow ache throbbed in my chest. What none of these smiling guests knew, what Harrison and I never talked about at dinner parties, was the absolute hell we had been living through behind closed doors for the last 3 years. The endless, grueling, spirit-crushing cycles of in vitro fertilization. 3 years of daily hormone injections that left my stomach black and blue. 3 years of crying silently on the cold bathroom tile, staring at single pink lines on pregnancy tests until my eyes burned. 3 years of tracking ovulation, timing intimacy until it felt like a clinical chore, and watching tens of thousands of dollars drain from our joint savings account, all for nothing. We had an empty nursery down the hall, painted a soft, hopeful yellow, with the door firmly shut so I wouldn't have to look at it. And then there was Vanessa. Vanessa was my best friend. We had known each other since we were teenagers, navigating high school drama and college breakups together. Now, she was standing by the dessert table, looking exhausted but beautiful, holding her 3-year-old daughter, Lily. Vanessa was a single mother. She had gotten pregnant unexpectedly right around the time Harrison and I first started trying to conceive. She told me the father was a random guy from a business conference who had completely blocked her number when she broke the news. Naturally, my heart bled for her. While my own womb remained stubbornly empty, I poured all my maternal instincts into Lily. I threw Vanessa's baby shower. I bought Lily her first crib. I slipped Vanessa hundreds of dollars in cash when she said she was struggling with rent, and I spent countless weekends babysitting Lily so Vanessa could pick up extra shifts at work. I loved that little girl. I really did. But sometimes, holding Lily's warm, tiny body against my chest, smelling the baby shampoo in her hair, the jealousy would rise up so fiercely it tasted like acid in my throat. I pushed it down, of course. I buried it deep, telling myself that my time would come. Harrison was always so patient with me during those dark moments. He would rub my back while I cried over another failed IVF cycle, kissing the top of my head and telling me that we just needed to keep trying, that everything happens for a reason. He was my rock. My perfect, devoted, lying husband. The party was starting to wind down. It was getting late, pushing past 10 o'clock, and the noise level in the house had dropped to a comfortable, intimate murmur. I was standing near the archway leading into the formal dining room, chatting with my sister Caroline about her upcoming vacation. I was taking a small sip of my champagne, letting the crisp bubbles wash over my tongue, feeling a rare moment of genuine relaxation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lily. She was getting fussy, whining and rubbing her eyes, clearly past her bedtime. Vanessa had set her down on the plush living room rug while she was packing up a small plate of leftover cake to take home. Lily was sitting cross-legged, digging furiously into her little pink canvas backpack. I smiled, watching her tiny hands pull out a stray crayon, a crumpled tissue, and, finally, a slightly bent piece of thick blue construction paper. It was folded down the middle, clearly a handmade card. I thought she was going to bring it to Vanessa, or maybe even to me. I had helped her color a few pictures earlier that week when I watched her. But Lily didn't look at her mother. And she didn't look at me. She scrambled to her feet, her little light-up sneakers flashing with every unsteady step, and bypassed her mother entirely. She walked straight past the dessert table, straight past Caroline and me, making a beeline for the center of the room. Harrison was standing there, holding a scotch glass, mid-sentence in a conversation with his senior partner, Mitchell. Lily walked right up to Harrison, grabbed the fabric of his tailored trousers with one tiny fist, and tugged hard. Harrison stopped talking. He looked down, his charming smile freezing on his face. The people around him chuckled at the cute interruption. Then, Lily held up the blue construction paper high into the air. In the sudden, quiet lull of the party, her sweet, high-pitched toddler voice rang out with crystal clarity. "Happy anniversary, Daddy," Lily chirped happily. "Mommy helped me make it." My brain stopped processing oxygen. The words floated in the air, disjointed and surreal. "Daddy." She said daddy. Harrison instinctively reached down and took the card from her hand. As he did, the blue paper flipped open, exposing the inside. From where I was standing, less than 10 feet away, I could see the messy, sprawling crayon letters written in adult handwriting, alongside a child's chaotic scribbles. The words were unmistakable. "To the best dad." My fingers went completely numb. The stem of the crystal champagne flute slipped straight through my grip. The glass hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, violent crash. The sound of shattering crystal echoed like a gunshot through the sudden, suffocating silence of the house. Tiny shards exploded across the floorboards, sparkling like diamonds under the recessed lighting. The pale golden champagne pooled around the toe of my expensive emerald heels. The soft jazz music playing in the background suddenly sounded distorted, like a record melting in the sun. Every single head in the room turned toward the sound of the broken glass. And then, as if pulled by an invisible string, every single pair of eyes shifted from me, to Harrison, to the little girl clutching his leg, and finally, to Vanessa, who was standing frozen by the dessert table. No one breathed. The silence was absolute, a heavy, physical weight pressing down on the room. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a car crash, in that split second before the screaming starts. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I was trapped inside my own body, watching a horrifying movie play out from behind my own eyes. I looked at Harrison. The smooth, confident architect was gone. His face had drained of all color, turning a sickly, ashen gray. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide and panicked, darting frantically from the blue card in his hand to my face, then over to Vanessa and back to me. He looked exactly like a cornered animal caught in a snare. Then I looked at my best friend. Vanessa looked like she was going to vomit. Her hands were shaking violently. She dropped the plastic container of cake, letting it clatter onto the table. She practically lunged forward, grabbing Lily by the arm and pulling her away from Harrison so roughly that the little girl stumbled. "Oh my gosh, Lily, no," Vanessa stammered, her voice shrill and trembling, breaking the dead silence. She's so tired. She gets confused when she's sleepy. She calls everyone daddy. Come on, sweetie, we are leaving." It was the worst, most pathetic lie I had ever heard in my life. A 3-year-old doesn't hand a specific, pre-written card to a specific man and call him daddy because she is sleepy. My sister Caroline stepped forward, putting a cautious hand on my shoulder. "Morgan," she whispered. I held up one finger. Just one finger. It was a silent command to the entire room, and it worked. Nobody moved. My heart wasn't just broken. It was undergoing a rapid, terrifying chemical transformation. The deep, agonizing grief of my infertility, the desperate love I had for my husband, the fierce loyalty I felt for my best friend, all of it was flash-frying in a split second, burning down to a cold, hard, razor-sharp clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply looked around the room, making eye contact with our confused, horrified guests. "The party is over," I said. My voice didn't even shake. It sounded calm, flat, and completely dead. "Please leave. All of you." Now, people scrambled. It was a humiliating, awkward exodus. Friends avoided my eyes as they grabbed their coats and purses, whispering hurried apologies as they practically ran out the front door. Within 5 minutes, the house was entirely empty of guests. Only Harrison, Vanessa, and a now-crying Lily remained. Harrison took a step toward me, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Morgan, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. She's just—" "Stop talking," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a whip. "If you say one more word, I will go into the kitchen, take the largest chef's knife off the magnetic rack, and I will use it. Pack a bag. You have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house before I call the police and tell them an intruder is refusing to leave." "Morgan, this is my house too," he pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. 9 minutes, I replied, crossing my arms over my chest. He looked at my face, searching for a trace of the forgiving, loving wife he had manipulated for years. He found nothing. He turned and sprinted up the stairs. I turned my gaze to Vanessa. She was crying now, clutching Lily to her chest. "Morgan, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her. I stared at the woman I had comforted, the woman I had given money to, the woman whose child I had loved while mourning my own. "Get out of my sight," I whispered, "before I forget that I am a civilized person." She fled out the front door into the night. 10 minutes later, Harrison came down the stairs with a duffel bag, threw his keys on the entryway table without looking at me, and walked out. The heavy mahogany front door clicked shut. I stood alone in the center of my beautiful, silent house, staring at the shattered glass on the floor, and realized that my entire adult life had been a masterclass in deception. I did not sleep that night. I didn't even take off the emerald green dress. I just sat on the expensive leather sofa in the dark, watching the moonlight crawl across the living room floor, listening to the absolute silence of the house. I didn't cry. Crying was for women who had lost something real. I hadn't lost a marriage. I had just woken up from a hallucination. When the sun finally came up, casting a harsh, unforgiving light over the stale champagne glasses and leftover hors d'oeuvres, a terrifying sort of energy took over my body. I was numb, but I was hyper-focused. I needed to know everything. I needed the timeline. I needed the logistics of my own betrayal. I walked upstairs to Harrison's home office. He had packed in a panic, grabbing clothes and his current laptop, but he had left something behind. Sitting on the bottom shelf of his bookcase, collecting a thin layer of dust, was his old backup iPad. He rarely used it anymore, but I knew it was synced to his main Apple account. I sat at his heavy oak desk, my hands surprisingly steady, and pressed the power button. The screen illuminated, demanding a 4-digit passcode. Harrison was a creature of habit. I typed in our wedding anniversary. Incorrect. I typed in his birth year. Incorrect. I typed in my birthday. Incorrect. I paused, staring at the glowing numbers on the screen. A sick, intuitive dread twisted in the pit of my stomach. My fingers hovered over the glass surface. Slowly, deliberately, I typed in 4 numbers. 0, 4, 1, 2. April 12th. Lily's birthday. The screen unlocked instantly. The little icons of the home screen popped up, mocking me in bright colors. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling out of the chair. It was real. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a confused toddler. He used her birthday as his password. I didn't look for text messages. Cheaters are usually smart enough to delete messages, or they use hidden apps like Snapchat. No, I went straight for the one thing people always forget to clean up. The money. I opened his synced email app and searched for the word receipt, and then I opened the banking app that we rarely used, an account he had set up years ago for his freelance consulting work before he made partner at the firm. What I found over the next 4 hours systematically destroyed any remaining shred of humanity I felt toward the man I married. Harrison hadn't just been sleeping with Vanessa. He had been fully supporting a secret second family. I found a recurring electronic transfer. Every single month, on the first of the month, Exactly $800 was transferred from his hidden account to an entity called Sunshine Daycare. I knew that daycare. It was the premium, bilingual preschool Vanessa had bragged about getting Lily into on a special single mother scholarship. The scholarship was my husband. I kept digging. I found electronic receipts for pediatric dental bills. I found Amazon order histories full of toddler clothes, educational toys, and a tiny pink bicycle. But the final blow, the one that finally made me break down and scream into the empty room, was the main savings account. This was our joint account, the one we had spent 3 years heavily funding. It was the account specifically designated for our final, incredibly expensive round of IVF. The procedure we were supposed to start next month. I looked at the balance. It was almost completely drained. Over the past year, he had been making steady, untraceable cash withdrawals of $2,000 or $3,000 at a time. Tens of thousands of dollars, our future baby's money, my blood, sweat, and tears, siphoned off to pay for rent, groceries, and premium preschool for the child he created with my best friend while watching me inject myself with hormones and cry myself to sleep. He didn't just break my heart. He stole my future to fund his lies. I slowly closed the iPad, the numbness entirely replaced by a cold, dark, and utterly consuming rage. By noon, I was in the shower, scrubbing my skin until it was red and raw, washing off the smell of the party, the smell of my ruined life. I dressed in a sharp, black tailored suit. I didn't look like a heartbroken housewife. I looked like an executive preparing for a hostile takeover. I called my sister, Caroline. I didn't give her the details over the phone. I just asked for one thing. Give me the name of that divorce lawyer your boss used last year. The one who destroyed her ex-husband. Caroline gave me a name and a number. Sylvia Vance. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a sleek, glass-walled conference room in downtown, sliding the backup iPad across a polished granite table. Sylvia was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp silver hair, immaculate posture, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She listened to my story in complete silence. She didn't offer fake sympathy or tissues. She just took methodical notes on a legal pad. When I finished telling her about the IVF savings account and the daycare payments, Sylvia leaned back in her leather chair and folded her hands. "Okay, Morgan," Sylvia said, her voice smooth and strictly business. "First of all, you need to understand that anger is a very useful fuel, but a terrible steering wheel. If you want to burn him to the ground, we have to do it legally, methodically, and without a single misstep." "I want everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but vibrating with intensity. "I want the house. I want his retirement accounts. I want him to leave this marriage with the clothes on his back and absolutely nothing else." Sylvia nodded slowly. "The adultery itself doesn't guarantee you all the assets in this state. However, the financial fraud does. What he has done is called dissipation of marital assets. He stole from the marriage to fund an extramarital affair. That gives us massive leverage." She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "Here is the strategy. Number 1. You do not confront them. You do not send angry text messages. You do not post a single word on Facebook or Instagram. Complete radio silence. Let him panic. Number 2, she continued, I am filing a temporary restraining order on all of your joint marital assets by 5 o'clock today. This will legally freeze his ability to move, hide, or withdraw any more money from your shared accounts. If he tries, he goes to jail for contempt." "And what about the child?" I asked, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. "That is where we use a scalpel," Sylvia smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. "I am bringing in a forensic accountant to trace every single penny he has hidden over the last 4 years. I am also assigning my best private investigator to follow him and Vanessa. We need concrete, undeniable proof of paternity and cohabitation. Once we have that, we introduce the true nightmare into his life." "A nightmare?" Sylvia leaned forward. "Morgan, your husband has hidden a child from the state for 3 years. He has not legally acknowledged paternity to avoid paying child support under the table. That is tax fraud. it is evasion, and the state will pursue him for every penny of back support, plus interest and penalties. We will inform the appropriate agencies when the time is right, after we secure your assets. I walked out of the law office feeling a profound, terrifying calm. I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of his destruction. The moment I turned my phone back on, it started buzzing like an angry hive. The notifications poured in, missed calls, voicemails, and dozens of text messages. They were all from Harrison. At first, the messages were frantic apologies. He begged me to pick up, begged me to let him explain. But as the hours wore on and I maintained my absolute, icy silence, the tone of his messages began to shift. It was a fascinating, horrifying study in narcissistic panic. By late evening, he was no longer apologizing. He was spinning. "Morgan, please stop ignoring me," read the latest message. "You are overreacting. Lily calls every man she meets daddy. She doesn't even know what she's saying. The card was a joke Vanessa made because I helped assemble her crib. It's not what you think. Vanessa is unstable. She has a crush on me, yes, but I never touched her. You know her, Morgan. She's desperate and delusional." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding a steady, furious rhythm against my ribs. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of this man. He was trying to gaslight me, trying to make me believe that I was crazy for believing my own eyes. He was throwing his mistress under the bus to save his own skin. But it didn't stop there. By the next morning, the real psychological warfare began. The flying monkeys descended. My phone dinged with a message from one of our mutual friends, a woman who had attended the anniversary party. "Hey Morgan, just checking in. Harrison called me last night crying. He said you kicked him out because of a misunderstanding with Vanessa's kid? Are you okay? He mentioned that you've been under a lot of stress lately with the IVF treatments. Maybe you're not seeing things clearly." Then came another message from a different friend. "Morgan, please call me. We need to talk. Harrison is terrified for your mental health. He said you completely lost it over a kid's drawing. You know the hormone injections mess with your head. Don't throw away a 7-year marriage over a panic attack." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to shake, not with fear, but with a blind, white-hot fury. He was using my infertility against me. He was using the 3 years of agonizing medical procedures, the miscarriages of hope, the physical and emotional torture I had endured to have his child, as a weapon to paint me as an unstable, hysterical, hormone-crazed woman. He was laying the groundwork to make everyone think I was crazy, that I had imagined the whole thing, that the poor, devoted husband was the real victim of a mentally ill wife. The betrayal was no longer just about infidelity. It was a systematic, calculated assassination of my character, my sanity, and my reality. He wanted to isolate me. He wanted my friends to pity him and doubt me. I took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of black coffee. I sat down at the island counter, placed my phone face down, and smiled a cold, mirthless smile. Let him spin his lies. Let him recruit his little army of ignorant, condescending friends. Let him think he had successfully outsmarted me and framed me as the crazy wife. Every single text message he sent manipulating the truth, every single phone call he made to our friends to complain about my mental breakdown, was just digging his grave deeper. I didn't reply to any of them. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and absolute. I was gathering the ammunition, and I was going to wait until the perfect moment to pull the trigger. Thank you for watching part 2 of the story. If you empathize with Morgan and are looking forward to the upcoming revenge, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. 3 weeks had passed since the anniversary party. 3 weeks of absolute radio silence on my end, while Harrison continued his frantic campaign to paint me as an unstable, hormone-crazed woman to anyone who would listen. I went to work, I met with my lawyer, and I lived in my sprawling, empty house like a ghost. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the universe handed me a gift. I was sitting in a quiet corner booth at a local, upscale coffee shop, reviewing some preliminary financial documents my lawyer had sent over. The bell above the door chimed. I did not look up, not until a shadow fell across my table. It was Vanessa. She looked terrible. Her usually perfectly styled blonde hair was pulled back into a messy knot, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing an oversized sweater that looked suspiciously like one of Harrison's old college pullovers. The sheer audacity of her standing there, breathing my air, sent a jolt of pure electricity straight down my spine. "Morgan," she said, her voice trembling, pitching high into that fake, breathy register she used when she wanted men to feel sorry for her. "I saw your car outside. Please just let me sit down for 2 minutes." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. I simply reached into my oversized leather tote bag on the seat next to me, my fingers expertly finding my phone. Without breaking eye contact with the woman who had destroyed my life, I slid my thumb across the screen, opened the voice memo app, and hit the red record button. Vanessa took my silence as permission and slid into the booth across from me. She immediately started crying. It was a practiced, delicate sort of crying. "I know you hate me," Vanessa began, sniffling and wiping her nose with the sleeve of the sweater. "I know what I did is unforgivable. But you have to understand, Morgan. Harrison and we never meant to hurt you. It just happened. We were soulmates who met at the wrong time." I stared at her, my face a mask of absolute stone. Soulmates. The word tasted like garbage in my mind. "He was so lonely, Morgan," she continued, leaning forward, trying to force a twisted sense of intimacy between us. "You were always so depressed about the fertility treatments. You were obsessed with having a baby. You stopped paying attention to him. He needed someone to talk to, someone to comfort him. I was just trying to be a good friend to both of you, and then one night, things just crossed a line." "So you slept with my husband out of charity?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. "No," Vanessa recoiled slightly. "No, we fell in love. And then I got pregnant with Lily. We were terrified. Harrison wanted to tell you the truth right then, he really did. He promised me he was going to leave you before Lily was even born. He said your marriage was already dead. But then you had that awful miscarriage and he felt so guilty. He said he couldn't abandon you when you were so fragile. So he stayed out of pity." I let the words wash over me. He stayed out of pity. He promised to leave before Lily was born. It was the confirmation I needed, spoken clearly and directly into the microphone hidden in my bag. "And Lily?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly even, suppressing the urge to reach across the table and wrap my hands around her neck. "She is his biological daughter?" "Yes," Vanessa whispered, looking down at her hands. "Of course she is. And he loves her so much. He is an amazing father. You can't take him away from her, Morgan. You're trying to freeze his bank accounts. You're trying to ruin his life. Please, I am begging you, let him go peacefully. We just want to be a family." I let a long, heavy silence stretch between us. The background noise of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations seemed to fade away. I slowly picked up my coffee cup, took a deliberate sip, and set it down. "You have always been pathetic, Vanessa," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "But I never realized how incredibly stupid you are until this exact moment." Her jaw dropped. Before she could form another word, I slid out of the booth, picked up my tote bag, and walked out into the rain, leaving her sitting there with her fake tears. I got into my car, stopped the recording, and immediately emailed the audio file to my lawyer. The web of lies was officially unraveling. 2 days later, I was back in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of my lawyer's office. Sylvia was sitting at the head of the long granite table, looking like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Sitting across from her was a man in his late 40s, wearing a nondescript gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked entirely forgettable, which I suppose is exactly what makes a brilliant private investigator. "Morgan, this is Mr. Vance," Sylvia said, gesturing to the man. "He has been very busy over the last 3 weeks." Mr. Vance did not waste time with pleasantries. He opened a thick manila folder and began laying 8 by 10 glossy photographs across the polished stone table. I looked down and felt my stomach drop, even though I already knew the truth. Seeing it documented was a different kind of pain. There were dozens of photos. Harrison and Vanessa walking through a local park on a Tuesday afternoon, pushing Lily on the swings. Harrison carrying Lily on his shoulders at a farmer's market. Vanessa and Harrison kissing in the parking lot of a grocery store. They looked like a perfectly normal, happy suburban family. The timestamps on the photos were damning. They were taken during the hours Harrison claimed he was at the architectural firm or visiting construction sites. "They're incredibly careless," Mr. Vance said, his voice a dry, factual monotone. "They operate under the assumption that they are invisible outside of your immediate social circle." He pulled out another document, a lab report with a certified seal. "You requested biological confirmation," Mr. Vance continued. 2 weeks ago, I observed the mother and child at a public playground. The child discarded a half-empty juice box into a public trash receptacle. I retrieved the item and submitted it to an independent laboratory, cross-referencing the DNA with a hair sample you provided from your husband's hairbrush. He slid the paper toward me. I didn't need to read the complicated medical jargon. Mr. Vance summarized it perfectly. The probability of paternity is 99.9%. He is absolutely the biological father. "Excellent work," Sylvia murmured, her eyes gleaming. "But what about the finances?" "That is where your husband made his fatal error," Mr. Vance said, pulling out a final stack of papers. These were not photos, but copies of lease agreements and utility bills. "Your husband did not just pay for daycare and toys," the investigator explained. 3 months ago, he signed a 2-year lease on a luxury townhouse on the north side of the city. The rent is $5,000 a month. The lease is officially under the name of Vanessa's mother, a woman who lives on a fixed pension and could never afford this property. However, the security deposit and the monthly rent payments are being wired directly from a corporate shell account linked to your husband's architectural firm. I stared at the lease agreement. The dates lined up perfectly. 3 months ago, Harrison had told me his firm was going through a cash flow crisis and convinced me to delay our final, most expensive round of IVF to save money. He didn't have a cash flow crisis. He was furnishing a luxury townhouse for his mistress and his secret child. He was building an entire parallel life, preparing to abandon me, using the money I had broken my back to earn. He was moving marital assets into a hidden corporate structure to fund a fraudulent lease, Sylvia said, translating the documents into legal ammunition. He has committed severe financial fraud against you and potentially against his own business partners. I looked at the photos of his smiling, fake family. I looked at the DNA test. I looked at the lease for the townhouse I had unknowingly paid for. The last lingering shadows of the woman who had loved Harrison evaporated, replaced entirely by a cold, calculating machine. "Sylvia," I said, my voice steady and hard. "I don't just want to divorce him anymore. I want to annihilate him. I want to take away every single thing that makes him feel powerful." Sylvia smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. "Then, let's prepare the trap." The next 2 hours in Sylvia's office were a masterclass in legal warfare. We were not just preparing a divorce filing, we were drafting a comprehensive blueprint for Harrison's total destruction. First, we finalized the financial claims. Because Harrison had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from our joint accounts and secretly diverted his income to fund the townhouse and the daycare, Sylvia filed a motion for dissipation of marital assets. In layman's terms, it meant that because he had stolen from the marriage to fund his affair, I was legally entitled to a vastly disproportionate share of what was left. "We are demanding 100% of the equity in your primary residence," Sylvia explained, highlighting the thick stacks of paperwork. "We are demanding his entire retirement account, his entire 401k, and we are going after his ownership shares in his architectural firm to recoup the stolen funds." "Will a judge actually grant all of that?" I asked, tracing the edge of the granite table. "With the audio recording of Vanessa admitting he planned to leave you, combined with the forensic accounting of his theft?" "Yes," Sylvia said confidently. "No judge in the state looks kindly on a man who steals from his wife's medical fund to buy a townhouse for his mistress." But we weren't done. The true masterpiece of Sylvia's strategy had nothing to do with the divorce itself. It had to do with the child. Harrison has been living a double life to avoid the legal and financial responsibilities of being a father, Sylvia said, leaning back and steepling her fingers. By keeping his paternity a secret, he has avoided paying official child support, which is calculated based on his massive corporate income. He has essentially been defrauding the state for 3 years. Sylvia pulled out a blank, official-looking form. I have drafted an anonymous tip to the state's Department of Child Support Services. We are providing them with the DNA evidence, the child's birth certificate information, and Harrison's tax returns. Once the state opens an investigation, they will forcefully establish paternity. And then what happens? Then, the state calculates what he should have been paying based on his high income for the last 36 months, Sylvia smiled grimly. We estimate he will instantly owe roughly $80,000 in retroactive child support, plus severe penalties and interest. And because he is a high earner, his future monthly payments will be astronomical. They will garnish his wages directly from his paycheck before he ever sees a dime. He wanted to be a father so badly. Now he was going to pay for the privilege legally and painfully. With the legal trap fully set, I turned my attention to the social and professional trap. For 3 weeks, Harrison had been running his mouth, convincing our mutual friends that I was a crazy, infertile woman having a nervous breakdown over a child's misunderstanding. He had painted himself as the long-suffering, devoted husband dealing with a hysterical wife. It was time to correct the narrative. When I got home that evening, I opened my laptop and drafted a single, polite text message. I sent it to the 6 couples who had been the most vocal in defending Harrison, the flying monkeys who had been texting me their unsolicited advice and fake concern for my mental health. The message was simple. Thank you all for your concern over the last few weeks. I am finally ready to talk. Please come to my house this Saturday evening at 7 o'clock for dinner. I have some important things to share about Harrison and the end of our marriage. Every single one of them replied within the hour. They all RSVP'd yes. They thought they were coming to stage an intervention. They thought they were coming to a tearful apology where I would admit I was wrong and beg for my husband back. I spent the rest of the week preparing. But I wasn't cooking a meal. I was running a heavy-duty copy machine, organizing manila folders, and preparing to burn their entire social circle to the ground. Saturday evening arrived with a crisp, cool breeze. My house was spotless. The dining room table, the same table where my world had exploded weeks earlier, was perfectly set. But instead of expensive china plates and crystal wine glasses, there were 12 identical, thick, legally bound manila folders placed precisely at each setting. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My guests arrived in a pack. They walked in with somber, pitying expressions, offering me tight hugs and sympathetic smiles. They were ready to perform their roles as the concerned, wise friends saving me from my own delusion. "Morgan, honey, you look so thin," murmured one of my oldest friends, a woman who had texted me just 2 days prior suggesting I check into a psychiatric facility. "We are so glad you finally reached out." Harrison has been absolutely beside himself with worry. "Please, everyone, take a seat in the dining room," I said, my voice pleasant and perfectly steady as a flight attendant's. They filed into the room, their murmurs dying down as they noticed the bizarre table setting. They cautiously took their seats, staring at the thick manila folders in front of them. "There will be no dinner tonight," I announced, standing at the head of the table. "I invited you here because over the last 3 weeks, my soon-to-be ex-husband has told you that I am suffering from a hormone-induced mental breakdown. He told you that I hallucinated an affair over a child's innocent drawing. And every single one of you believed him." The room grew very quiet. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their expensive chairs. "I am not crazy," I continued, my voice hardening into steel. "And I am done allowing him to use the trauma of my infertility as a shield for his degeneracy. Please, open the folders." Hesitantly, they opened the covers. On page 1, you will find a certified DNA report proving with 99.9% certainty that Harrison is the biological father of Vanessa's 3-year-old daughter, Lily, I narrated as they flipped the pages, their eyes widening in collective shock. On page 3, you will find bank statements proving that for the last 3 years, Harrison has been systematically draining the savings account meant for our IVF treatments to pay for his secret daughter's premium preschool. Gasps rippled around the table. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. On page 7, you will find photographs taken by a licensed private investigator showing Harrison and Vanessa playing house in parks and grocery stores during the hours he claimed to be at work. I paused, letting the overwhelming weight of the documentary evidence crush their preconceived notions. But I saved the best for last. And finally, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and connecting it to the house's Bluetooth speaker system. In case you think Vanessa was an innocent victim in this, or that Harrison was just trapped in a bad situation, please listen to this conversation I recorded 4 days ago. I hit play. Vanessa's high, breathy voice echoed through the dining room. He promised me he was going to leave you before Lily was even born. He said your marriage was already dead. He said he couldn't abandon you when you were so fragile. So he stayed out of pity. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was heavier than the night of the anniversary party. The flying monkeys were completely paralyzed. Their faces were pale, their expressions twisted in horror and deep, profound embarrassment. Morgan, one of the men, finally stammered, his voice thick with shame. We had no idea. He lied to us. He looked us in the eye and swore on his life that you were just confused. I know he did, I replied coldly. And you chose to believe the man who lies for a living, rather than the woman you have known for a decade. You chose to pathologize my grief rather than question his perfection. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. You have seen the truth, I said, looking back at the 12 silent, ashamed people. Now take your folders, walk out of my house, and lose my number. If any of you ever speak to me again, or try to contact me, I will consider it harassment. Have a wonderful night. They practically tripped over each other leaving, clutching the folders like radioactive waste. My social circle was gone, but I didn't care. I was clearing the battlefield for the final strike. Harrison's pride, his ego, and his identity were entirely wrapped up in his career. He was a junior partner at a prestigious architectural firm that specialized in designing high-end, family-focused community centers and eco-friendly resorts. The firm's entire brand was built on integrity, family values, and community trust. Harrison had used that firm to fund his betrayal. And now, the firm was going to destroy him. On Monday morning, I prepared a special package. I didn't send it to Harrison. I sent it directly via certified overnight courier to Mitchell, the strict, old-fashioned senior partner of the firm, the same Mitchell who had been laughing with Harrison at our anniversary party. The package did not contain anything about the emotional betrayal or the DNA test. Corporate partners do not care about who is sleeping with whom. They care about liability, optics, and money. The package contained 3 things. First, a copy of the luxury townhouse lease, highlighting the fact that the security deposit and monthly payments were originating from one of the firm's obscure corporate shell accounts, completely unauthorized. Second, a detailed cross-reference of Harrison's corporate credit card expense reports over the last 2 years. Harrison had been expensing weekend trips, fancy dinners, and hotel stays under the guise of client site visits and business development. I had matched those exact dates with the private investigator's photos of Harrison and Vanessa vacationing at those exact same resorts. He had been using corporate funds to finance his secret family vacations. Third, a polite, professionally worded letter from my lawyer, Sylvia. The letter simply stated that during the discovery phase of our divorce proceedings, we had uncovered significant financial irregularities involving the firm's accounts, and we felt legally obligated to inform the senior partners before we filed the documents in open, public court. It was a polite way of saying, your partner is an embezzler, handle it, or we will handle it publicly. I tracked the package online. It was delivered and signed for at 9:30 in the morning. By 11 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Mitchell. Morgan. Mitchell's voice was tight, rigid, and vibrating with suppressed rage. I have received your package. My forensic accountants have spent the last hour reviewing the corporate card expenses. I just wanted to personally verify that you possess the original photographs matching these dates. I possess the originals, the digital negatives, and the sworn testimony of the private investigator who took them, I replied calmly. I see, Mitchell said. I am profoundly sorry for what you are going through, Morgan. Please assure your legal counsel that this matter will be handled internally, immediately, and with extreme prejudice. We will not require a public court filing regarding the firm's accounts. He hung up. 45 minutes later, my phone began to ring incessantly. It was Harrison. I let it go to voicemail. I let him call 5 times before I finally opened the visual voicemail app to listen to the frantic, breathless audio. Morgan, pick up the phone. Harrison was screaming, his voice cracking with pure panic. What did you do? Security just walked into my office. They boxed up my desk. Mitchell just suspended my partnership indefinitely. They are talking about calling the police for embezzlement, Morgan. You have to call Mitchell. You have to tell him it was a misunderstanding. I'll pay it all back. Morgan, my career is over. Pick up the phone. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. It sounded like a symphony. He was escorted out of his beautiful glass office by 2 burly security guards in front of his entire staff. His company car was repossessed in the parking lot. His corporate accounts were frozen. In the span of a single morning, the arrogant, high-flying architect had been reduced to an unemployed liability facing criminal fraud charges. But the guillotine hadn't finished dropping. We still had the deposition. The deposition took place 2 weeks later in the massive, soundproof conference room of Sylvia's law firm. A court reporter sat in the corner, her fingers hovering over the stenograph machine, ready to capture every single word under oath. I sat next to Sylvia, wearing a sharp white blazer, my posture perfect. I felt nothing but absolute icy calm. The heavy wooden door opened, and Harrison walked in. I almost didn't recognize him. The golden boy was gone. He had lost at least 15 pounds. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, his face was unshaven, and his eyes were bloodshot and darting. He looked like a man who had not slept in a month. His lawyer, a cheap, nervous-looking man he must have hired after his corporate accounts were frozen, trailed behind him. Harrison sat down across from me. He tried to make eye contact, tried to give me a look of profound sorrow and apology, but I looked right through him, fixing my gaze on the wall behind his head. The deposition began. Under oath, under penalty of perjury, Sylvia began to dissect his life with the precision of a neurosurgeon. She started with the money. She slid the bank statements across the table, forcing Harrison to verbally confirm, line by line, that he had transferred tens of thousands of dollars from our joint medical savings to pay for the Sunshine Daycare. Is it true, under oath, that you utilized marital funds designated for your wife's in vitro fertilization to pay for the preschool of another child? Sylvia asked, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Harrison swallowed hard, looking at his lawyer, who simply nodded grimly. Yes, Harrison croaked. And did you use marital funds, masked through a corporate account, to secure a luxury townhouse lease for Vanessa? Yes, he whispered. Then, Sylvia pulled out the state documents. The trap was springing shut. Mr. Harrison, Sylvia said, her voice dropping to a dangerously soft tone. Are you the biological father of a 3-year-old child named Lily? Harrison squeezed his eyes shut. A tear leaked out and rolled down his cheek. Yes. Have you ever legally claimed paternity or paid state-mandated child support for this child over the last 36 months? No. We had a private arrangement. A private arrangement funded by stolen marital assets, Sylvia corrected sharply. She pulled a thick, official envelope from her briefcase and tossed it across the table. It landed right in front of Harrison. This arrived from the Department of Child Support Services this morning, Sylvia announced. Based on the anonymous tip provided to them, and your staggeringly high income over the last 3 years, the state has officially established your arrears. You currently owe $84,000 in back child support, due immediately. Furthermore, your future monthly obligation has been set at $3,500 a month until the child is 18. Harrison stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. The math was finally calculating in his exhausted brain. He was unemployed. He was facing a massive lawsuit from his former firm for the embezzled lease money. Because of his financial fraud against me, Sylvia was successfully arguing that I keep the house, his retirement accounts, and every liquid asset we had left. He was walking away from our marriage with absolute zero. And now he owed the state of a massive $84,000 debt, plus a crippling monthly payment he had no job to support. If he didn't pay it, his passport would be revoked, his driver's license suspended, and he would eventually face jail time. He was entirely, comprehensively ruined. He looked across the table at me, his face a mask of total devastation. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just let out a long, ragged, sobbing breath, buried his face in his hands, and broke down crying in front of the court reporter, his lawyer, and the wife he had thrown away. I watched him cry. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I just felt bored. The monster under the bed wasn't scary once you turned on the lights. He was just a pathetic, weak man who had finally been crushed by the weight of his own lies. 2 months later, the gavel finally fell. The divorce was finalized in a rapid, uncontested hearing. Harrison's cheap lawyer had advised him to surrender, knowing that if we went to a full public trial, the financial fraud and embezzlement would attract the attention of the district attorney. I walked out of the courthouse with everything. I kept the house. I kept his entire retirement account. I kept the cars, the investments, and every single piece of valuable furniture. Harrison walked away with 2 suitcases of clothes, his golf clubs, and a mountain of catastrophic debt. The fallout from his destruction was swift and merciless. Without Harrison's high income to support her, Vanessa's fantasy life collapsed overnight. The luxury townhouse lease defaulted after 1 missed payment. When Vanessa realized that Harrison was not only broke, but drowning in massive child support debt that the state would relentlessly pursue, her soulmate facade vanished. She packed up her daughter, abandoned the townhouse in the middle of the night, and moved 3 states away to live in her mother's cramped basement. She completely cut contact with Harrison, refusing to let him see Lily, proving that she only ever loved the lifestyle he provided, not the man himself. Harrison was a pariah. His architectural firm allowed him to quietly resign in exchange for dropping the criminal embezzlement charges, but they made sure he was blacklisted in the industry. No reputable firm in the city would hire a man who stole from corporate accounts to fund a mistress. The last I heard, he was renting a tiny, rundown studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, working as a low-level draftsman for a commercial siding company, with his meager wages being heavily garnished by the state to pay off his massive child support arrears. One rainy evening, as I was packing up the last of the boxes in the master bedroom, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from a new, unrecognizable address, but the subject line gave it away. "Please, Morgan." I opened the email. It was a sprawling, desperate, pathetic essay from Harrison. He wrote about how his life was a living hell. He wrote about how Vanessa had used him, how she had manipulated his loneliness, and how he had finally realized that I was the only woman who ever truly loved him. He begged for a conversation. He begged for a chance to apologize in person. He wrote that he thought about my emerald green dress every single day, and that throwing away our marriage was the greatest mistake of his life. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading the words of the man who had completely broken me just a few months prior. I waited for the anger to rise up. I waited for the sadness, or the vindictive joy, or the tears. But nothing came. The emotional well was completely dry. I felt nothing for him. He wasn't a villain anymore. He was just a sad, pathetic stranger typing into the void. I didn't reply to tell him to rot in hell. I didn't reply to gloat. I simply hit the delete button, blocked the email address, and went back to packing my boxes. He no longer existed in my universe. It has been exactly 1 year since the anniversary party. I didn't keep the sprawling, beautiful house we built together. It was too big, too empty, and too full of ghosts. I sold it in a seller's market, took the massive equity check, and bought a stunning, modern condominium on the top floor of a high-rise in the city. It has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, a sleek minimalist kitchen, and absolutely no room for a nursery. I am sitting on my balcony right now, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, holding a glass of very expensive red wine, watching the city lights blink against the night sky. The journey to get here was the hardest thing I have ever done. There were nights when the betrayal still stung, when the memory of my best friend and my husband plotting against me felt like a physical knife in my ribs. But time, distance, and the absolute finality of my revenge eventually healed those wounds. I look back on my 3 years of infertility differently now. When I was going through it, I thought the universe was punishing me. I thought my body was broken, that I was failing as a woman and a wife. I cried oceans of tears over the babies I never had. But now, looking at the wreckage of Harrison's life, I realized that the universe wasn't punishing me. It was protecting me. If those IVF treatments had worked, if I had brought a child into that toxic, deceptive marriage, I would be tied to that monster for the rest of my life. I would have been trapped navigating custody schedules, forced to communicate with a pathological liar for the next 18 years. My infertility, the very thing he used to mock my sanity and justify his affair, was actually the ultimate shield that allowed me to walk away clean, wealthy, and completely unburdened. I even think about little Lily sometimes. I think about that sweet, 3-year-old girl marching up to Harrison in the middle of a crowded room. At the time, that blue construction paper card felt like a bomb that destroyed my world. But it wasn't a bomb. It was a scalpel. It was a sharp, sudden, painful incision that cut out a massive, rotting tumor I didn't even know was killing me. That little girl, in her innocent confusion, saved my life. I am 35 years old now. My career is thriving, my bank accounts are overflowing, and my peace is absolute. I sleep beautifully through the night. I wake up in a home that belongs entirely to me, untainted by lies or hidden agendas. I survived the ultimate betrayal, I scorched the earth, and from the ashes, I built an empire of one. Looking back, some of our mutual friends told me I went too far by destroying his career and leaving him with absolutely nothing. They said exposing his financial fraud to his firm was vindictive and that I should have just walked away quietly. Am I wrong for scorching the earth, or did he get exactly what he deserved? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming epic revenge stories. See you in the next video.